Good morning. My name is Kevin Carroll, and I'm the Vice Chancellor and Chief Marketing Officer here at the University of Denver. For those of you who are visiting us, welcome. We're pleased to have you on our beautiful campus for the first presidential debate, and we hope you're enjoying your time here. Now, the awarding of the debate for the University of Denver was an honor for us, but also for the city of Denver and for the state of Colorado. And the fact that we were chosen highlights that Colorado is an important element in the political scene in the U.S. So the panel that you'll be seeing today is actually part two of a panel that we did in Washington, D.C. a few months ago. And they'll be talking about the issues that are important to Colorado voters as they approach the ballot box in the coming weeks. So we hope you enjoy. But first, it's my pleasure to first introduce the Chancellor of the University of Denver, Robert Coombe.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this morning, and welcome to the University of Denver for Spotlight Colorado. It's a real pleasure to have the debate at DU in just a day or so, and it's very fitting given the vision of the university to be a great private university dedicated to the public good. And it's also very fitting that's in Colorado. As Kevin was alluding to, this is a pivotal state in the election. And it's pleasing for those of us who live and work in Denver and in this wonderful state. DU was founded in 1864, roughly the same time as the city itself. And so we've been here as long as there really has been any sort of Denver at all in this place. And so we share a long history with the city, nearly 150 years now. And over that period of time, I think we've acquired some of the traits of our city, of our state, the kinds of things that are open-mindedness and entrepreneurial spirit, those kinds of things. And it's so pleasing to have the eyes of the nation on us at this pivotal point in the election. This is the 115th installment of the debate event series. That is a series of events that we've had here at DU starting back in January for our students. And over that period of time, we've had more than 25,000 participants in those events. It's been a very, very pleasing thing to see that our students really have embraced all of this as an extraordinary learning opportunity. So let's begin with this morning's panel. It's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator this morning, Dee Dee Myers, who certainly is a well-known person throughout the United States. She was the White House press secretary for President Bill Clinton, the first woman to hold that role ever in the United States. After leaving office in the Clinton administration, she became an author, wrote a book with a provocative title of Why Women Should Rule the World, and since then has been managing director of the Glover Park Group, a really well-known communications organization in Washington, D.C. Please welcome Dee Dee Myers.
Thank you. Thank you, Chancellor Coombe, for that introduction and for your great leadership of this university. We're thrilled to be here today. As Kevin mentioned, we began this two-part series with a conversation in Washington in August to look at the very purple swing state of Colorado. And of course, the debate has not only put the spotlight on the University of Denver, but on Colorado and the very tight presidential election that's going on here. And so with that backdrop, with just a little over a day to go till the debate, which obviously will put the eyes of the world on this very spot, we thought it would be a good opportunity to just drill down a little bit on what's happening here in Colorado, because the entire presidential election could come down to this one state. It remains incredibly tight. I think both candidates are here. President Obama's on his way, actually. Governor Romney is here. So they'll be here yet again, and their presence is obviously well felt on television every couple of minutes. So with that in mind, let me introduce our very distinguished panel. We're thrilled to have everybody. Far end is Rick Palacio, who is the chair of the Colorado Democratic Party. Next is Dr. Seth Masket, who's an associate professor of political science here at DU. Next to him is Dr. Lisa Martinez, an associate professor of sociology who specializes in immigration and Latino politics. Ryan Call, who chairs the Republican Party in Colorado, the state GOP party. Dr. Sam Kamin, a professor of law here, and to my right, Dr. Sharon Lassar, who's the director of Accountancy, also here at DU. So let's just get going. Ryan, I want to start with you. This has been a competitive state, and I'm going to ask Rick the same question. Who's going to win?
Mitt Romney's going to win. Of course he's going to win.
What a shocking response. Shocking. And you know why? Why do you, I mean, it's really tight. The president's maybe a point or two ahead, but it's all in the margin.
Absolutely right. I mean, the polls are incredibly close. Colorado has an opportunity to really potentially cast those deciding electoral college votes. And one of the things that I think Colorado voters in particular cares deeply about is having candidates and elected officials that follow through on their commitments. And that lead the state in a way that they promised to in terms of their governance. And that's one of the things that we are looking at. And over the course of the next 35 days or so, I think what will be clearly defined is the great contrast of visions for the future of this great country. And Mitt Romney's plan to help grow the economy and jobs is what I think folks in Colorado really care about.
Rick, your perspective? Romney's going to win?
I agree with my counterpart.
That Mitt Romney's going to win?
On everything except that Mitt Romney's going to win. I beg to differ with you on that point. Sure. Colorado, no doubt about it, Colorado is going to be a pivotal state. It is a pivotal state, and this election is going to be incredibly close, probably just within a couple of points. But President Obama is going to win because he is clearly shown bold leadership on the decisions that he's made in moving our economy forward, and Coloradans have felt that. And contrast that with where we are and the vision that Mitt Romney has shown, or perhaps lack of vision and detail. I think the Coloradans have a very clear choice here. And what they're going to do is when they go to the ballot box, they're going to go with the guy that they know and they trust, as opposed to the guy that still has a lot to tell the American people.
Now, for a long time, Colorado was not a purple state, but it was a pretty red state, right? What has changed, and Seth, let me toss that to you, but anyone else feel free to jump in. What's changed that's made Colorado such a purple state this time around? And of course, President Obama won it pretty decisively 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's been an interesting shift. Really, very recently, within the last decade. I think since World War II, or even since like 1940, I think only 4 Democratic presidential candidates had won the state. There's been a very rapid shift, largely due to migration. Colorado has grown a lot, mostly people from Democratic areas of the country, coming from California, Washington, Oregon, and a large influx of Latino voters as well, people who have mostly voted in a Democratic fashion. And that's just made the state a lot more competitive as it's grown.
And what does that mean for the future? I mean, will it become, let me ask you that Rick, will it become a more Democratic state?
I always think that it's not just demographics, which is certainly an incredibly important part, the growing Hispanic population and others, but I think that we are, and really have always been, a fairly independent-minded state. Even Republicans, Democrats, I mean, certainly it's not just the party affiliation numbers that are pretty evenly divided, but it's really, even among Republicans and Democrats, we tend to be fairly open to supporting a candidate from the other party if they're outlining, a clear and relatively conservative viewpoint. Colorado has long elected Democrat, pro-business, sort of moderate Democrat governors, while at the same time electing Republican majorities to the legislature. And so there is, I think, some of that Western independence that's still deeply rooted in our state.
But the influx of different people, particularly Latinos, has helped reshape kind of the feel of the state in a lot of ways. So, Lisa, how will that continue to change? I mean, first of all, can the Republican Party reach out to Latinos? It's not a given that they're going to vote Democratic, but how else has immigration of particularly Latinos shaped politics here?
Well, I think we've especially noticed the impact in 2008. That was probably the moment that we recognized that Colorado was important, but the Latino vote in Colorado was also important. Something on the order of 68% of Latinos came out in support for Obama in 2008. relative to McCain. And at least as far as the numbers that I've seen more recently, it's pretty comparable this time around. So I mean, it's definitely a demographic. It's a group that is up for grabs for either party. I don't think we can really say that either party has a stronghold. But one of the things that we also know is when we talk about the issues, which especially domestic issues tomorrow night, you know, the kinds of things that I think Latino voters in particular care about are issues that will be a deciding factor in terms of which party can garner the most support, immigration being key among those.
Right. So it's not just the makeup of the electorate, right, that's going to determine how the state comes up. It's going to be who comes out, who actually goes to vote. You know, the presidential election, as obsessed as people like me are with top of the ticket, there are other issues on the ballot, including an initiative, a referendum on whether or not to legalize marijuana. And Sam, that's been something you've been following closely. One, how's that going? And two, does it have the possibility of reshaping turnout?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. It's polling ahead at the moment. It's important to remember that similar measure in California was polling ahead at about this time 2 years ago in 2010. And the Obama administration came out quite strongly against it at that time. And Attorney General Holder made quite clear that it would be a real tension between the federal and state governments if Californians were to pass that, and it did go down to defeat. It'll be curious to see whether the Obama administration can repeat that trick this time around. It was easier to do that in 2010 in a pretty safe Democratic state in a non-presidential year. Here, as we've heard, it's a very close presidential race. And I think the Obama administration would be quite careful before they appear to be coming in with a heavy hand, particularly as my former student, Ryan, had to put that. No. As he pointed out, this is a fiercely independent state, and Washington feels a very long way away to a lot of Coloradans. So the ability of the Obama administration to have influence on that might be quite limited.
Is it? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, it's interesting to see why they would time it in this election. I mean, I know there's some folks out there trying to say that George Soros is putting this issue on the ballot because he thinks it might help drive youth turnout. I don't think that's likely to happen, and I think that the legalization of marijuana will probably fail at the end of the day because Coloradans understand that what makes Colorado unique and really a great place to be and to work. We don't want to become the Amsterdam of America, and we also don't want to, you know, attract that kind of an element that would so undermine the kind of great reputation that we have in the business community and quality of life. So I think that ultimately it probably fails, and I don't really see it impacting in a tremendous way turnout.
See, this is fascinating because the argument that Ryan just made is the argument that our Democratic governor recently made. He said Colorado is known for many things. Let's make sure that marijuana isn't one of them. And the former gubernatorial candidate of your party, Mr. Tancredo, came out in favor of the amendment. So it's really made some strange bedfellows. In the state in the last month or so.
Scrambling the easy, identifying who comes down on what side. Of course, you know, pot isn't the only issue that voters are facing. As Rick and Ryan pointed out, the economy is a big one, and people's plans to do something about the debt and deficit. You're a professor of accountancy. Does Washington have a math problem?
They do have a math problem, but they also have just a structural problem that can't be fixed with just math. And math only takes you so far. Here in the state of Colorado, we have a balanced budget requirement.
As most states do, right?
As most states do. And accounting tricks are used to balance the budget. So back in 2003 to 2004, we deferred payment of payroll by 1 day to move payroll for one paycheck into the next year to balance the budget. That trick has been used in variations about 4 times since. So at this point, we've deferred a pension payment, we've deferred Medicare payments, we've deferred a category of payments just to try to balance the budget and kicking the problem down the road, which is typical of the federal government, kicking the problem down the road. We have a huge deficit situation, accumulated deficits of $16 trillion, which is the same as every person in America, including the infant that was born 2 hours ago to the elderly individual that has a few days left, of $50,000 per person of money that has already been spent. and owed. And if you look at the promises that we're going to make, or the promises, I should say, we have made, and the payments that we are going to be making over our lifetimes, it's the equivalent of 2 nice houses. So if you think about selling your assets to pay your bills over your lifetime, everyone in America right now has to have 2 nice houses ready to sell over their lifetimes to be able to pay the bills that are coming due. It's more than the household wealth of America. We can sell everything we own, shake out the couch cushions for change, empty our pension plans, and we still don't have enough wealth in this country to pay the bills for commitments we have already made. And those issues need to be addressed. And I think that's something
That's terrifying.
No, this is absolutely critical. The notion of these unfunded liabilities, these promises and essentially blank checks that we keep writing, it's not just a math problem. It's a problem of leadership. I mean, when the Democratic Party fails to pass a budget for 3 years running, when we keep, we're using scare tactics to scare seniors into saying, well, we're going to end Medicare as we know it. Well, we can't continue to keep these entitlement programs as we know it because we're bankrupting this country. We have to make some major changes.
Yeah, what I think we need to do, we need to have an honest conversation, and not just our political leaders, but the American people have to have an honest conversation about what we're getting and what we're giving. We can't tackle the deficit just by cutting alone. It has to be through a combination of raising revenues and also cutting. And what Democrats have tried to do, in all fairness, and I think in all honesty, what Democrats have tried to do is take ideas to the table, and they have met with resistance from the other side. The Republican Party that we have right now is absolutely incapable and unwilling to even raise revenues by $1, and that creates a huge problem. What I think Washington needs to do is take some lessons from our Colorado elected leaders on both sides and have the ability to come together and make some tough decisions, because it's not going to be easy. And again, it's not something that is going to happen just within the Beltway. It's going to have to be every single person in this country has to have a realization as to what we're facing.
Do you think, and Seth, I'll direct this to you, is this an issue that resonates particularly in Colorado? I mean, one, obviously 1992 was a long time ago, but in that was the year when Ross Perot ran as the guy who's going to get under the hood and fix the deficit, right? And he got 19% of the vote here. So I'm just wondering if Colorado voters and the kind of independent nature that, Ryan, you talked about, it makes this a place where those kind of sort of practical decisions resonate.
Well, Perot did pretty well here in '92, actually. I did partially on that message.
19%. He's stone crazy.
I think we talk about the federal deficit and the ongoing debt. There's a certain amount of fatalism that can creep in and just figure this problem simply can't be solved. And I think it's important to remember we actually have run surpluses in this country, actually within our lifetimes, within the lifetimes of my undergraduate students. So it actually wasn't that long ago. It helps when you have a very strongly growing economy and revenues are coming in, which they're currently not. But these problems are not completely intractable. That may, I guess Dick Cheney famously said deficits don't matter. And I think, if you pin any particular voter down, they would say, yeah, they really don't like the idea of running a deficit, but when it comes to the fix for it, either like raising taxes or cutting services they care about, well, they tend to care more about those things than the deficit itself. But I think you're right that sort of a certain independent spirit, a certain independent mindedness did fuel some of Perot's rise in '92, and it does have a certain audience here still. Yeah,
because 30% of voters in Colorado are independents, right? That's I mean, it's a trend all over the country, but it's a pretty high number here. Is that a sign, Rick, that that the voters are dissatisfied with both parties, and partly for this reason, that they can't come together and get things done?
Well, what I think we have in Colorado is actually more Democratic unaffiliated than Republican-leaning unaffiliated. So I like to think that we are fiscally somewhat conservative, but socially we're liberal. And I think it reflects in the policies that we have passed. When we had personhood on the ballot for 2 years, 2 cycles running, it failed. It failed to get enough signatures to meet the ballot again this year. When we had medical marijuana on the ballot, it passed. When we had Tabor on the ballot, it passed. So I think that there are a lot of examples going back in our past here in Colorado that shows We have a growing number of unaffiliated voters, but they tend to be Democratic leaning as opposed to more conservative or Republican leaning unaffiliateds.
And do you agree with that?
I really don't. I mean, I think that, that the unaffiliateds are up for grabs from both parties, but I think that many of our unaffiliateds want to see real solutions. And Republicans have been able to lead with that and working with the Democrat governor, be able to pass a budget, be able to rein in spending. But I think we have to have a very honest conversation with Colorado voters as well as the American people that we can't keep borrowing and spending on the pace that we're doing. We have to start recognizing that there are and ought to be limits placed on what government provides, and that there needs to be a shift towards a little bit better level of personal responsibility.
Let's talk a little bit about the demographic groups, Latinos, and then we'll talk a little bit about women. But back to you on this question, Lisa. Not only is there a growing number of Latinos who seem to vote pretty strongly for the president 4 years ago. Obviously, the president then promised to reform immigration. That hasn't happened. What effect will that have? And how much? How big? How will Governor Romney have to do better in order to be competitive here than he's doing now?
Well, I think in terms of the appeal of Obama, one of the things that really seemed to matter in 2008 was the fact that he said in many forums that comprehensive immigration reform was at the top of his list. And that didn't happen, and I think that disenchanted a lot of Latino voters for whom, even if it doesn't affect them directly, they know people. And so this had been an issue that has been sort of looming over them for the last few years. I think perhaps what might have changed a little bit is the deferred action plan that President Obama proposed in August. And at least as far as what I'm hearing from folks locally is that they're still hoping for comprehensive immigration reform. But until then, this is okay, this is good. So I think given the recency that was announced, I think that's the thing that people are going to remember when they go to vote in November.
The president's executive order that will defer deportation for this so-called dreamers?
Yes.
And so you think that's had an effect, that's a palpable...
Right. I don't think it's hurt. And I think the other part of that, to your other question, is the fact that at least as far as the issue of immigration, that Romney has proposed, and during the primaries, it was a proposal about self-deportation.
Right.
And so we've seen a lot of movement. And just this morning, I was reading, Governor Romney was asked by the Denver Post what his plan would be for immigration. And at least from what I read, he indicated that he would respect the deferred action plan if he were to be elected. So it seems that there's been a lot of movement from the primaries to this point, but the fact that there hasn't been any real specifics as far as what his policy is with regard to immigration, I think has hurt him, at least up to this point.
And Rick, I mean, thinking about Colorado voters and reaching out to Latinos, how can Governor Romney reach out to them? Oh, I'm sorry, I just called you Rick and you're Ryan. Ryan. Sorry.
I think his plan...
You guys both have, 4-letter names that start with R.
It's a challenge. It is a challenge. I think Governor Romney's discussion about respecting the visas, but also working in a substantive way to fix the problem. And one of the frustrations that a lot of people in the Latino community feel is that the deferred action is a Band-Aid, and it actually takes the wind out of the sails for a real, honest conversation about important immigration reform. For 2 years, during the first 2 years of the Obama administration, Democrats had filibuster-proof majorities in the U.S. Senate. Had he wanted to enact immigration reform, the Democrats could have. They chose not to, and it's not a priority apparently for them. Governor Romney has come out and said very clearly that it is a priority of his administration. He'll enact it. Some of the specifics that he has talked about is the importance of family reunification, making sure that there's a path to permanent resident status and citizenship, especially for college graduates and for those that serve in the military. But while the president made lots of promises to the Latino community, Mitt Romney will follow through.
But now I have to disagree because Mitt Romney has said some things on the campaign trail that are absolutely run opposite to what you just said. I mean, he made the comment about people self-deporting. He made the comment about vetoing the DREAM Act should it pass his desk. I believe, as part of the Hispanic community, you have to have an entree into a community if you're going to at some point, attempt to court their vote. And part of this entree into the Latino community is immigration reform. As Lisa said, it may not affect us, but it affects someone that we know. It may not be our generation, but it's someone after us or our neighbors and our friends. You can't just summarily dismiss an entire group of people and then expect that those that are related to them are going to jump onto your side. What Governor Romney said this morning to the Denver Post, in the Denver Post, was not that he was going to respect the deferred action plan, so much as that he was not going to deport kids if they had that 2-year extension on their visa. He didn't say, then go into detail as to what his plan was next. Is he going to continue that program? If he wants comprehensive immigration reform, what does that comprehensive immigration reform look like? And that's what we're missing from Mitt Romney, are the details of these policies. What President Obama has talked about is if the DREAM Act actually passes the Congress, that he would sign it. In 2010, we attempted to pass it. December of 2010, it failed to reach cloture in the Senate only because of the Republican filibuster process, an abuse of the Republican filibuster process. We've tried to work with Republicans that have been working on comprehensive immigration reform for years and years and years. People who supported things now no longer support them because the Republican Party has moved further and further to the right. And the further to the right that they go, the more distance they create between themselves and the Latino community.
I think this is an issue very much like the budget. There is a lot of room for the parties to work together. The American public wants this issue solved. We want comprehensive immigration reform. We want structural change to our tax structure, not a simple cop-out of just raising the rates. We want structural change. There are $1 trillion worth of exemptions, deductions, and credits that could be eliminated without touching the rates. We have $1 trillion. Immigration
reform. Would that
reform,
include things like the home mortgage interest deduction and charitable contributions deductions?
Those are expenditures, but on the other hand, we all want to make gifts to our church. We all want to make gifts to the American Red Cross. Do we want the mega wealthy to be able to make a contribution of $1 billion to a family-run foundation, get a tax deduction for it, put a child in charge of running that foundation, where they receive a salary, an unlimited expense account, and then have that foundation spend only 5% of their capital every year to do things like wildlife preservation in Africa? Why not use those monies here at home? So I think even with the charitable contribution deduction, there is room for eliminating or capping it. The average American does not give $1 billion to each of their 3 children like Warren Buffett did in 2005 or 2006, and has just pledged to give an additional $600 million to each of his children's run foundations. So there is room for change, but what we need is leadership. We need a president who's willing to work and find those compromises and find solutions that both parties can embrace. And I don't think we've seen that in the past 4 years. I think there was a lot of hope for change, that we would see that, but I don't think we did.
Does anyone think that'll come up in any kind of meaningful way in tonight's well-rehearsed debate?
Tomorrow's. Yeah,
tomorrow, yeah.
I suspect that we're going to have a lot of conversations about that, talking about promises made and whether those promises were kept, talking about the vision and the great, I think, major choices and challenges that we're facing as a people.
But one of the criticisms that both candidates are facing right now, particularly Governor Romney, is that there isn't enough specificity, there aren't enough details along the lines of what Sharon was just talking about. Like, if you're going to reduce rates, how do you offset, how do you make it revenue neutral? Are we going to hear about that?
I think you're going to hear about some of that. Obviously, an hour and a half format in the debate doesn't often give you the opportunity to get down into the weeds like you need to. That's part of the reason why there's a lot of Mitt Romney's detailed plans. In fact, he was criticized for having his 59-point plan or whatever put on the web. But a lot of that information is certainly out there and available.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mitt Romney's been running for president for 6 years. It seems to me like that's long enough to give the American people plenty of detail on all of his various tax policies and other proposed policies, and he's not done it. He's not leveled with the American people when it comes to the details, which is what they want to see. And back, I think, to the previous point on coming together and working together, I worked for the former House Majority Leader in the Congress when we did health care reform. I saw Republican after Republican member of Congress walk into our office to meet with my former boss to see if there was a path forward. What could we agree upon in health care reform? And leadership in the Republican Party refused to allow them to work with Democrats. So What we had a party and we had a president that said, we're going to try to work with you, but if you refuse to work with us, we're going to move forward anyway. And that, I think, is the bold leadership that people expect. When you don't have two parties that are coming together to work together, something has to get done. You can't just have gridlock. And what we've seen with the Republicans obstructing everything that the president has proposed, if the president had not acted, we would have complete gridlock.
I think providing details also takes away room for compromise. I think there are a lot of good ideas on structural reform. There's a very good ideas on how to reform Medicare that has bipartisan support with Ryan and Rivlin. But there are, if a presidential candidate lays out every single detail, then you start alienating people and maybe quelching ideas. I think these ideas have to come from both parties, and I think the American public has to communicate with their legislators that we want this to happen. We want these compromises, and we want to see some movement.
Well, and nothing's going to happen until, hopefully because things are so desperate that something will happen. But the public is not always communicating that to leaders, right? They're
That's
not
right.
voting against people who don't compromise or who aren't doing enough to reach across the aisle. And so, Seth, over to you. What will it take for the American electorate to send a message to Washington?
Well, they send messages all the time. The problem is they're not always very consistent. The electorate of 2008 looked very different from the electorate of 2010. And they were sending messages, but they were saying, go forward in this direction now, please go in the other direction very rapidly. So it's partially a measure of who votes. You get a different measure of turnout, but also partially the electorate is really very limited into what exactly it can broadcast to its elected officials. They can only respond to what's on the ballot. And we have some initiatives where voters can be a little more specific, but mostly they're being offered a choice between one party or the other. And for better or worse, we live in a time when those parties are offering very starkly different messages. So a vote for a Republican means something very different from a vote for a Democrat. But really, voters can only respond to the question that's presented to them in the first place.
Any chance for a third party coming out of all of this?
I think it's pretty unlikely. Given how polarized the parties are, you're not really going to get much traction going to the far left or the far right now. The only space there would be is running in the middle. And for the most part, the people in the middle pay the least attention to politics. It's harder to find the candidates in there. And those few third-party reform movements that we occasionally see, such as I think it was Americans Elect last year, they tend to start at the presidential level, which is the level at which they're least likely to succeed. You rarely see these movements start with city councils and school boards where they actually could make some traction.
It's a long proposition, no matter how you slice it. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll turn it. If any of you have questions, I'm happy to take them. I want to talk a little bit about the gender gap. We saw a national poll this morning that showed the gender gap at 18, with women supporting President Obama by plus 18, men actually supporting Governor Romney by plus 10. And I know that's been an issue here. It was probably helped Senator Bennett in his reelection in 2010. He won women pretty significantly. Is that going to decide the outcome or help decide the outcome of this election?
I think it's going to be a deciding factor, certainly. We're looking at 53% of the electorate in Colorado as being female, and with double digits at a minimum, 12, 13, 14% difference between the president's support and Mitt Romney's support. It has a huge impact. It's going to have a huge impact. And again, I think this goes back to somewhat related to the Latino question. You have to have an entree into a community. You have to generate some sort of trust. People have to believe that they could trust you on their issues. And what Mitt Romney has done is certainly put women in a place where they don't believe that they could trust him because he doesn't trust them with things like making their own healthcare choices. So I think gender is going to make a huge impact, have a huge impact in this upcoming.
And I guess I have to strongly disagree with that. I mean, this kind of scare tactics, division, and really misrepresenting in substantive ways the positions of the Republican Party with respect to issues that women care about. This is the tactic the Democrats have and continue to use. I mean, accusing Republicans of trying to ban birth control or things like that. And the question really is just, should taxpayer dollars be used to pay for it? And should we, as a government and as a people, respect the rights of conscience for religious institutions and private citizens? Democratic Party has a very different view on that.
Well,
Well,
but that's not entirely true because the personhood amendment, which was on the ballot here more than once, would have outlawed many kinds of contraception as well as all abortions.
That's right, and I know that some Republicans support it, but there are many, many Republicans that did not. So to say that it represents the view of all Republicans is just inaccurate.
Well, Dee Dee, also I want to go back to the very first bill that passed when President Obama took office was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Equity Act. Every Republican, except for I think one woman, voted against the Lilly Ledbetter. So we're talking about freedom of conscience. I have 3 sisters. I would like to know that my 3 sisters are going to be able to go out and get a job, and if they're equally as qualified with a male counterpart, that they're going to be paid as much. But the Republican Party opposed President Obama and voted against Lilly Ledbetter. So it's not just on women's choice issues. It's also economic issues that are important to women as well.
Do you have any thoughts on why the gender gap is so large?
You know, it's not quite as large in Colorado. I think part of it's because voters here, women in particular, understand that it's jobs in the economy. It's the price of gasoline at the pump that's doubled over the last 4 years. The price of groceries going up that really are the issues that women care much more about, the quality of their local schools. Those are the things that I think are going to be much more on the minds of voters. Democrats may try to scare women and scare seniors and scare everybody into thinking that the Republican is a big, mean, nasty, scary person. And the reality is that that's the same tactic they've been using against Republicans for 30 or 40 years. And at some point, it just doesn't work anymore.
I think the social issues are important, however. And one reason is, you know, as an accounting professor, even accounting students sometimes don't want to hear about the budget issues. And so it's much easier to focus on the social issues as driving the debate. And, you know, unfortunately, I think that that's a misplaced attention because no matter who's president, I don't see Roe versus Wade being overturned. I don't see people not being able to get birth control. I don't see, you know, big social changes being made no matter who's president because, again, most of the country is in the middle. And on these social issues, the majority will remain the status quo. Unfortunately, the candidates have picked up these social issues and are trying to differentiate themselves on social issues, which at the end of the day, I don't think are going to change. And so, you know.
But they're emotional issues,
they're
right?
emotional. They're a lot easier to understand than just how big is $1 trillion.
Right.
You know,
accounting
so,
issues have not always been
right.
characterized as emotional.
Exactly.
Although they can be, right?
Yes.
Does anybody have a question? Think about it. Let me know if you have one. I'll come back. You know, there's a lot of issues, though. Issues ebb and flow over the course of our national life, right? And it wasn't so long ago that issues of crime and punishment and capital punishment in particular were front and center. 1988, okay, that was a while ago, but the first question at the first debate to Governor, then Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis was, if your wife was raped and murdered, would you support the death penalty? Sam, with that backdrop, as we head into tomorrow night's debate, why do these issues ebb and flow, and why do they not seem to be having any role in this campaign?
Sure, I think Governor Dukakis is still trying to answer that. I think a lot of it has to do, you know, Ryan was talking about pocketbook issues. I think crime and punishment issues are salient when crime is high, when people feel a genuine risk of crime. And crime is way down in the United States. In some of our biggest cities, violent crimes are down by 3/4. You know, New York City is sort of has worked miracles in terms of how much safer its citizens are than they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And so crime, punishment, these things don't have the salience that they have. You know, in the past couple of days, I've been talking to some foreign reporters, and they said, well, how much gun control talk was there after the Aurora shooting? I said, well, almost exactly none. Whether it's Coloradans or Americans, gun control does not seem to be an issue that's on the radar screen. It has been in elections past.
Yeah.
It does not seem to be this time, and I think part of the reason is that with the exception of sort of remarkable and horrible situations like we saw in Aurora earlier this year, Americans feel safer than they have in recent years. Now, the fiscal consequences are going to be interesting. We have the people that we are putting in jail for 20 or 25 years. We have not yet felt the fiscal impact. Those people would be in jail for 8 or 10 years. we would still be paying for that. But the increasing use of very long prison terms for nonviolent offenders or for repeat offenders who are not murderers and rapists, there will come a reckoning for the amount of money. You know, we put more people into prison than any other Western nation. We're going to have to pay for that, and that gets more expensive as our prison population ages. The cost per year of incarcerating a senior is much higher than it is someone that's more likely to be committing crimes in their 20s, and that is an issue that we are going to have to face, just like the other looming fiscal issues, paying for the punishment that the United States, sort of alone among Western nations,
and how big a factor are those longer prison terms? What else has contributed to this, as you said, 75% drop in violent crime?
You know, that's sort of the trillion-dollar question. One of the embarrassments for criminologists is that the simplest questions, why does crime go up and down, are hard for us to answer. But, you know, part of it is demographics, part of it is imprisonment, part of it is economy, and part of it is policing. You know, New York City has engaged in a number of practices, some of which have made headlines, some of which are unconstitutional, but their crime rate sure has dropped. And the trade-off that Americans are willing to make in terms of what price they're willing to pay for safer streets is an issue that doesn't have a lot of national salience, but is one that we're going to have to confront.
I just lost my train of thought on that question. Never mind, we'll move on. Some of the other issues that have gotten some attention here that maybe haven't gotten as much nationally is energy, right? Colorado is a big energy producer, oil, coal, increasingly natural gas. It's also a place that people think of renewables as doing well. Is that a big issue here? And do you expect to hear either candidate address it at tonight's debate?
I absolutely do. It's going to be a big part of the discussion. It's been a big part of what Mitt Romney's been talking about in terms of how to help grow the economy, as well as make us more energy independent. Colorado in particular has tremendous natural resources, the Niobrara Formation, oil shale, as well as coal deposits, low sulfur coal, which is an important part of the clean coal efforts to continue to power America. We've got tremendous resources right here at home, and it's been largely blocked by a lot of EPA regulations, as well as a significant slowdown of lease access by the federal government. We have seen some oil and gas development go up, but the vast majority of it has been on state and private lands, not on the federal lands, because the federal government keeps blocking it.
We're sitting on vast natural resources. We are producing states. 66% of our electricity in Colorado comes from coal. Coal in Colorado is here probably to stay. At least in my lifetime, it's going to be the primary source of electricity. That means we also have a responsibility as to how we access these resources, and we have to make sure that we're doing so in a responsible way, because it's not just us that are going to have to live here. When I die, the planet doesn't disappear. I want to make sure that we're leaving our planet in a healthy state for our kids and our grandkids. So we need to make sure that we're being responsible about this development, and I think that we are. Coal itself has increased, our production has increased 9% just in the last couple of years. But we have a very diverse portfolio. Roughly 15% of our electricity comes from renewable sources, including wind and solar. And then we have natural gas as well. I think one of the differences that we have between parties here is we both recognize that we have these amazing resources, but how do we use them and who do we give incentives to? We have $4 trillion of incentives going to the oil and gas industry. Yet on the other side, 15% of our electricity is coming from renewables. Mitt Romney and the Republicans have said that they don't want to renew the production tax credit for wind turbines. That's real jobs. Makes economic sense. In my hometown, 500 people are employed by Vestas wind plant, and they're starting to be laid off because Mitt Romney has laid a line in the sand and said he doesn't want to extend those credits. So we need to make sure that we're working together again and doing things that make economic sense. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be what we're getting out of the Republican Party.
Seth?
I think particularly with this issue, with energy issues, with renewable energy, with the power of the president to allow drilling or not allow drilling, This is an unusual issue in that who the president is and who the Secretary of the Interior is matters a great deal. So I think the people who are involved in this industry, particularly in Colorado, are going to be paying very close attention to the candidate stances on this. Also, I'd like to, if it's okay, put in a little plug for the University of Denver is actually commissioning a poll later this week after the debate. Ann Seltzer and Associates is leading the way on this. My colleague Peter Hansen has played a lot of the role in putting the poll together. We're going to be asking about a lot of these issues that we've been discussing today, and in addition to people's beliefs and favorabilities toward the candidates and their impression of the debate. So we hope to have some results on that, some really good hard numbers on Sunday and Monday.
They'll give us a little insight into what issues really are driving voters at this particular moment. We very much look forward to that. Brian,
I could not agree more with Professor Masket. He's exactly right. Who we choose as our president, who we choose by extension as the Department of Interior and others will have a dramatic impact on whether America can become energy independent and whether Colorado's economy can grow. When you've got the Department of the Interior's approach towards the oil and gas and the natural and the energy industry described as the boot-on-throat approach versus someone that's going to roll out the carpet for these kinds of initiatives. But Republicans also have to ask the question, and we are asking the question, at what cost? We've seen the cost of utilities, according to a recent Denver Post article, go up 20% and slated to go up another 20% if we continue to just impose mandates regarding renewables without asking the question, well, how much is that going to cost? We've seen, the cost per kilowatt hour for coal versus natural gas as compared to renewables, and it's orders of magnitude difference. And so we can say, let's have all this great stuff, but we also have to ask the question, who's going to pay for it? And that's one of the questions that the other party doesn't always ask. It's easy to say, we'll promise you lots of stuff paid for by somebody else, but at some point, we have to pay that bill, and we have to make sure that we're balancing policy decisions with the economic costs and impact.
But there's another facet to this conversation, which is this is also a state that's thought of, because of your incredible natural resources, as one of environmental concerns. And so there's both the dollar and cents costs, the accounting costs, but there's also the long-term preserving the legacy, not killing the goose that laid the golden egg here in Colorado, since tourism is one of your most important industries. And so how do you balance that, and where do voters come down? Jump ball. Who wants to take a crack at it?
We have some actually incredible standards by which fracking must occur and shale oil development must occur. In that when that development, when that research goes into place, you have to divulge to the public what actually you're pumping into the ground in order to get these chemicals out. Because we, as Coloradans, believe that we should know these things. There needs to be some transparency. And we've worked together, Republicans and Democrats, the oil and gas industry, with our legislature to develop these things. But you're absolutely right. And the chairman asked the question, at what cost? We can't just do this. It can't just be dollars and cents. It has to be at what cost to our environment. And our environment here in Colorado is our economy.
And I think for the tax credits and the other tax preferences built into the code for the different types of energies, the American public doesn't realize that they are paying for that. We have spent more than $1 trillion than we've taken in for the past 4 years. And again, it's all in tax credits, exemptions, and deductions. And a lot of those are energy related. And, should we be subsidizing a form of production that couldn't stand on its own? And if it can stand on its own, why are we subsidizing it? And so if you ask the American public, do you know that you're paying $20 so this energy company can spend less money buying an alternative form of energy? They might not be willing to support that. But again, it's hidden. Nobody really knows those true costs.
And it's difficult. So let's talk about that a little bit, because what do voters know and how are they getting their information, right? I mean, they're not having these kinds of substantive conversations. Maybe some of them are at home, but they're not getting it from either campaign, quite frankly, right? I mean, you guys are ground zero for political advertising. So what are voters seeing on the air? Seth, I know you pay particular attention to this. What kind of ads are people seeing? What volume? And are they contributing to a thoughtful discussion about these complex issues?
They're contributing only in the sense of what you can do in 30 seconds, right? So it's not that there are no issues in there. There actually are meaty issues in there. Barack Obama has had a number of ads for a couple of months now talking about issues related to reproduction and women's health care. And clearly seems to be targeting, I guess, sort of moderate suburban women who could vote either way, one of the few swing voters we actually have in our state. More recently, he's been going after Romney's so-called 47% comments and just has made an ad about those. Romney's ads seem to be just more generally that the economy has been mismanaged. It could be stronger under different leadership. And these are really the main messages that we've seen all year. I mean, they're hammering the issues that we know that people find important. But there's limits to how much discussion you can provoke in a 30-second ad. I think that's been partially what people hope the debate will do tomorrow night.
Right. Is there a lot targeted to Latino voters?
There has
Spanish
been,
language and English?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the best examples would be the forum that both Governor Romney and President Obama participated in a few years ago as part of Univision, a Spanish language channel that reaches millions of Latinos, Central and South Americans. So I think that's certainly an indication that they're trying to reach out. If you go to the websites, the respective websites, you see a lot of effort to reach out to those voters as well. And while you don't necessarily see it reflected in the ads, I think there's definitely been a push to get out those voters, register those voters, make sure that those voters have access and are able to vote. So yes, I'd say we've seen that.
And that reverberates in the community when the candidates go to the Univision forum and try to talk about these issues?
Absolutely. I mean, I think especially the forum, that to me seemed to be a really important step for both political parties because it went beyond, I think, what we've tended to see in past elections, the sort of campaign stop, you speak a few words in Spanish, you eat some Mexican food, and then you kind of roll out there without a lot of regard to actually listening to the issues that are of concern to those communities. So the fact that they were actually involved in a public forum where they were asked to sort of speak to their points and what it is that their administration would do that would benefit and improve the lives of Latinos, I think that went a long way for people.
Great. One last chance if anybody has a question. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Bingru Wang. I'm with Hong Kong Phoenix TV. You just mentioned about the ads. Since day one of the presidential campaign, China is mentioned every day. China is stealing American jobs. How did the China affect the debate, and how did this affect the decision of those voters? Thank you.
That's a great question. We haven't talked at all about foreign policy. Doesn't seem to be top line. Ryan, why don't I start with you, since Governor Romney has been hitting the president pretty hard on that.
Sure, he has. Trade and the lack of this president's efforts to pursue trade agreements is an important part of it. I mean, we do need to make sure that we're doing a better job of addressing the issue of the balance of trade as well as in protecting and preserving America's intellectual property rights. China has been an offender, both in terms of intellectual property as well as currency manipulation. And that costs jobs here at home in terms of manufacturing. So it has been something that Governor Romney has certainly talked a lot about. We haven't spent much time talking about foreign policy, and I think that's another opportunity to draw some real clear contrast between the current administration and what we're seeing right now.
Do you think voters are paying attention to it, though? This is something that's resonating with Republican voters?
I think when they turn on the television and they see, American flags being burned and our ambassadors being killed and dragged through the streets, you have to wonder, where is America's leadership, or what is our response? And when the president and his team can't even seem to figure out whether it's a planned attack or a terrorist attack or just a response to some YouTube video, I think that we have a real disconnect with respect to where is America's foreign policy, especially as it relates to our allies abroad in terms of Israel, as well as whether we're going to have a very clear or principled foreign policy approach. Haven't seen that from this president.
I think it's very easy to be a sideline referee or a backseat driver when it comes to America's foreign policy, and that seems to be what Mitt Romney has been trying to do. He has jumped at every chance to tear down the president really every turn, but yet when he has stepped onto the foreign stage himself, he has absolutely fumbled the ball. One of our greatest allies in Great Britain, he offended them really the first one or two sentences that he made when he was on foreign soil. There's no doubt we have issues with foreign policy right now in the world. The world is not necessarily a settled place. But I think going back to your question, this is, I think, when we have an economy as we do, where it's just starting to recover, there is an incredible amount of pride as to we should be keeping our jobs here. We believe that not only should we put the research and development, or research into developing something, but that if we're going to build something like solar panels, that we should do it right here at home as opposed to shipping those jobs overseas. What we see out of the Republican Party and Mitt Romney's proposed policies is a continuation of allowing foreign companies, making it easier for foreign companies to ship jobs overseas as opposed to creating things right here. So what we're doing as a party, the Democratic Party, is fighting to make sure that we're making it right here in America as opposed to shipping jobs overseas.
I want to just ask one quick tactical question because I'm curious about the ground game. And then I want to ask each of you as we close what you would like to hear from the debate tomorrow. What's one thing you would love to hear the candidates address, and maybe if you have a reason why. But the tactical thing is I want to know how you all think the ground game is going in both states. We've heard a lot about the Obama turnout machine, and we've heard a lot about the Romney turnout machine. Both candidates are kind of bragging that they have sort of really invested a lot and expect that they're going to get their voters to the poll, which could obviously make the difference in a close election. Ryan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. The Republican Party this year is working incredibly hard. We've made over 1.2 million voter contacts in the state of Colorado just over the last number of months. We've made 6 times the amount of door knocks and 5 times almost the amount of phone calls that we made during the 2008 campaign. So we're reaching out and we're connecting with voters one-on-one, individually. Great ground game operation for the state party in partnership with the Romney campaign and our coordinated effort. One thing that is a significant contrast to, I think, the way the Democratic Party is running their operation is ours is very much more of a team approach. It's a Republican coordinated victory. So we're partnering up with our candidates for the state legislature, for the Congress, and for the White House, all working to help turn out those Republican votes and persuade those persuadables on our side.
We have a larger ground game now than we did in 2008. We have roughly 59 field offices open across the state, literally thousands of volunteers on the ground every day and hundreds of paid staffers. And I think the significance of that 59 field offices, we only have 64 counties. So we have offices in small towns across Colorado. And what we're doing is we're going to ensure that we win the way that Democrats always win, which is a strong ground game, a neighbor-to-neighbor contact. We're just a few weeks away from the election, and people have turned their television sets off. So people have gotten tired of seeing the ads, and that's when a good, solid ground game actually makes sense.
When does voting start here?
Absentee ballots go out October 15th, and so folks are going to be able to start casting those ballot votes within the next 2.5 weeks.
So the whatever happens in this debate and the vice presidential debate and the presidential debate the week after that will really start to
have an important impact.
Okay, so Sharon, I'm going to start with you. What would you like to hear the candidates talk about?
Well, the biggest issue, the biggest unfunded liability we have is Medicare, and the Affordable Care Act is not affordable. It does not change the structural problems in our Medicare, in our aid for medicine and medical care in this country. And until we tackle those structural problems, we will continue to have this looming unfunded liability that just keeps growing. And it's an issue that really needs a better approach. It needs a bipartisan approach. And we need households to start talking about things like caps on how much we will spend. I have a sister who went through cancer treatment. There's a Cadillac insurance plan, but the insurance plan has a cap. And she and her doctor have structured out the treatment with the cap in mind. In Medicare, there's no cap. You just keep writing the checks. There's no thoughtful approach as to how we tackle a very structural problem in this country. And we need to start having moral discussions about how to handle that.
For me, whether it's on the issue of health care, whether it's on drug policy, whether it's on gay marriage, I'd really like to hear the candidates talk about the appropriate balance between federal and state power, that we have that sort of our unique federal system. What things should be decided in Washington, what things should be decided here. Neither party, I think, is wholly consistent about where the state should be allowed to exercise their expertise and where federal policy is required. And I really hope that Mr. Larry has something that forces the candidates to come to a strong conclusion on that tomorrow night.
I'd like to see a good, thoughtful discussion about energy policy, and I think we're going to see some of that tomorrow. But I think largely it's going to be painting out in very clear terms the significant choice that the American people have, whether we're going to continue down the path that we're on right now with out-of-control spending and entitlements and a debt that now exceeds $16 trillion, or whether we're going to correct our course and get back into those traditional principles that have helped make America strong.
For me, it's not a particular policy. It's more that rather than stick to the talking points on both sides, I'd like to hear specifics about the policies. And I think one of the reasons perhaps why President Clinton's speech at the DNC was so well received was the fact that he explained things to people. So I would actually say people want to hear how their policies are going to affect them. What are the specifics of those policies? So I would actually kind of counter what Sharon was saying earlier. I think people want those details. So rather than the respective parties sticking to their talking points, I'd like to hear more specifics.
Two things. One, we're seeing record levels of campaign spending this year, not just from the candidates, but also from 527, super PACs, and other groups out there. And I don't know that this is necessarily a good or bad thing, but I would really like to hear what the candidates have to say about it. Certainly some voters are becoming increasingly aware of it and are irked by it, and I'm curious if either candidate wants a change in the current system. Also, I would say just more generally, these are two very skilled debaters. They're very bright men who can think on their feet, and they're not particularly given to very moments of passionate outbursts or anything like that. So I'd like to hear someone mess up. I think it'd be good drama.
Well, the pundits applaud.
Yeah.
What I would like to see is detail. Detail, especially about what Mitt Romney is proposing for our country, which I think we have been sorely lacking and the American people are looking for. There's no doubt Mitt Romney is going to do well in this debate. He's had, I think he had 20 debates when he was running the Republican primary, perhaps give or take 16 of which he came out on top. So he has a lot of skills here coming into this debate. But I want to hear more than just talking points and more than just one-liners from him. I want to make sure that we the American people, get some details out of him.
Well, great. Thank you, everybody, for your thoughtful perspective on this election. It's going to be an interesting week, obviously, very high stakes. It's going to be an interesting 5 weeks as we wind down to Election Day, and we'll look back and see what we got right and what we missed. But I thank you all for being here as part of this pre-debate exercise, and thanks to the University of Denver for hosting, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.